Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm going to be reviewing the discussion which went out on Richard Dawkins' channel, The Poetry of Reality. The title is Why Are We Here? Exploring the Mystery of Existence. And the participants are as follows. Obviously Richard Dawkins. We've got Richard Swinburne, who is representing Christianity. We have Jessica Fraser, who is speaking on Hinduism. Sylvia Jonas is a Jewish philosopher. So I'm going to start off by playing you a clip which I find amusing, and Richard Swinburne is going to be speaking, and I want you to pay attention to what Richard Dawkins does, his body language, when Richard Swinburne makes a statement about the whole question of whether it's possible for the universe and all the laws of the universe to be in existence without some entity, some supreme entity behind it all. So just watch this.
Might not have a beginning. I'm looking for an explanation of what keeps it in being all the time, whether that's an eternal or everlasting or not.
Did you catch it right at the end of that clip when Dawkins went, no, probably not. Okay, watch it again. It's really worth seeing.
Might not have a beginning. I'm looking for an explanation of what keeps it in being all the time, whether that's an eternal or everlasting or not.
Did you catch it that time? Okay, well, I do believe that Richard Dawkins should probably take a bit of a break from this, because I can see that he gets stressed out. He does a remarkable job of self-control there. And he has got strategies, one of which is, breathing in and bracing himself in his chair to prevent himself from interjecting when something for him outrageous is said. But let's move on. Now, before I go through the whole thing, I want to just comment on something that Richard Swinburne said. I'm going to preempt a bit here because it kind of doesn't fit with the rest of the discussion, which is mainly on the question of, I don't know, why is there something rather than nothing, and not just on the question of the existence of God, etc., but this sort of broader question. So Richard Swinburne at some point was asked if people go to, does he believe in an actual heaven and hell? And he said yes, he did. And then it came to the question of the problem of evil. What about suffering? And he said that he was asked whether there was whether it's compatible with there being a loving God that there's so much suffering in the world. And his comment to that was that God had to make a world in which there are real consequences from actions, and that if we lived in a toy world where nobody ever got hurt, it wouldn't be that the world wouldn't have any true reality to it or any truth to it. And of course, this is also necessary for us to have free will, because we all effectively have the choice about whether we're going to send ourselves to heaven or whether we're going to send ourselves to hell. So on the question of the amount of suffering, he said that he seemed to imply that there is not an excessive amount of suffering in the world, and that it seemed to him that there is a lot, but it's not too big. But then again, he said, how could you quantify these things? And then he went on to say, but what is the worst that can happen when you suffer? Well, you die. And 100 years on this planet is nothing compared to eternity next to Jesus Christ. Yeah, so there we have it. It doesn't matter the worst that can happen to, I don't know, a child who's suffering in agony from cancer, maybe just 4 years old or something like that. It doesn't matter, because after all, you've got the rest of eternity to look forward to. So yeah, the worst that can happen when you suffer is you die. So it's no big deal, really. Best not to worry about it. Yeah, okay, so we're going to get on now. So yeah, So we've got three theists effectively, and then we've got Richard Dawkins. So we've got one Christian, got a Hindu, and we got a Jew. And I noticed particularly with, let's see, what are their names? Excuse me a moment. Jessica and Sylvia were both very much, let's see if we can harmonize. Let's see if we can harmonize all the religions. And, particularly, well, not particularly, because both of them did it really. Jessica Fraser started off saying that all the religions have got, we've got this this shared set of insights, something which is common to all religions, trying to answer the big questions. And, let's all love each other. Let's all allow these possibilities. And to an extent, we saw some arguments from popularity, but I'll get onto that later. So yeah, I must say, I found her incredibly irritating to watch. Yeah, not because she's not an atheist, but because there are some atheists I find irritating to watch. But really, she was awful. The way that she was. Oh, we've got the Vedas and we've got the creation story, and it's remarkably like the Big Bang. The way that it describes, there's no space, there's no time, and then we've got this, we've got this big expansion. And then she goes on to say, but in the end, it ends rather philosophically, very poetically, asking the question, who is behind all this? Who knows? So she says that. She's quoting from the Vedas, or rather paraphrasing it. And then she moves on to something else, which I thought was really amusing, because she says that in the Vedas, I'll just quote here what she says, maybe the highest God in heaven knows who is behind it. So I don't know. But if that's an example of what is in the Vedas, I don't think I've missed a lot by not really reading up on it. And it looks to me like there's as much nonsense in Hinduism as there is in Christianity and all the other religions I've looked into. So not really missing much. But what her argument boiled down to is we don't know who it is, because of course in Hinduism it's not a kind of monotheistic religion with a person right at the center who is going to save the whole of mankind. It's something different. It's not the same as that. It's not really a God-centric religion in the same way that Christianity and Judaism are, and Islam, of course. But she does believe that, or she argues that there has to be something which is self-existent, something which is non-contingent. So yeah, she's going down the contingency route, and that she uses this very strong modal verb. There must. We've heard this actually. We heard it from Richard Swinburne. There must be. They never really demonstrate. There must be something behind all of this. There must be something which is non-contingent, which is self-existent. There cannot be an infinite regress, etc., etc., and something which generates emergence of properties, which would be a first cause. So, okay, well, that's really, she did come back several times, and she more or less just reiterated. And amazingly, she took control near the end of the discussion. There is a host, and she suddenly jumped in. I won't play it, but she suddenly jumped in near the end and said, maybe I can put this question out to the whole panel. If there is going to be any major discoveries towards establishing the existence of God, what do you think it's going to look like? Richard Dawkins, perhaps. I thought that was downright rude that she did that. Completely out of place. But, that was bizarre. If any of you guys saw that, I'd love for you to account for that, why she suddenly took control of that and put the question out there to the panel and kind of missed and redirected. Although I have to say one thing, it's a legitimate question. It's just the way that it was done. So that was her. Now, we had, oh, by the way, Richard Swinburne went first, so no, I'm not going to do it in order of who spoke. So then we had, who is it? Sylvia Jonas, who I looked her up. She's a professor of philosophy at the University of Jerusalem. She is Jewish, so yes, she is a theist. She's also got some material on YouTube about theism, why theism is correct and everything. So yes, she is a theist, yet she starts off by again by trying to harmonize, between science and religion. And we've seen this, I've seen it myself. I used to live in Cambridge, and unfortunately I never went to one of these lectures, but I frequently saw posters entitled Science Meets Religion. Science Meets Religion, lecture given by, so-and-so, or symposium, whatever. I frequently saw these posters, but in those days I wasn't really into counter-apologetics, and I must admit I'd already realized myself that religion is no analog to science. There's no relationship between science and religion in any kind of meaningful sense. That science and religion are both two poles. They're poles apart. One is based on observation and evidence, collection of data, development of hypotheses, which are then proven or tested by various means, and theories established. The other one is mainly on faith. So in other words, belief without evidence, something which you believe even though there is not sufficient evidence to suggest or to indicate that you should hold that belief. So yeah, so for me it was a no-brainer not to waste time going along to those, because I imagined that it would mainly be people from the Department of Theology, theists trying to somehow shoehorn or to somehow appropriate science to somehow legitimize or give more credibility to religion. So no, I never did go. Maybe I should have done. Maybe I regret that, but I don't think I would have discovered anything substantially eye-opening. Yeah, so she's saying that she doesn't want to go down the causation route. She's saying that you can have two positions. She says there are two positions which we often see. One is too religious in the sense that the claims and the beliefs make us uncomfortable in the modern world, and that religion has got to accept what science has discovered if it's to be taken seriously. My only point to that is that if religion has got to accept what science has discovered, well, that's fine. I mean, that's fine, but I don't really see how that actually leads to validating the claims that religion is making. It doesn't really. I mean, look, the Roman Catholic Church have said they accept the theory of evolution. So they accept. How can you accept science? How can you accept the findings of science and the methodology of science, and yet believe things which are antithetical to what science is? In other words, miraculous claims, the supernatural, things which have got nothing. Of course, miracle claims could be tested scientifically, but as for the supernatural, science has got no way of exploring that. So I don't really quite. I think that she's trying to, as a religious person, she is trying to appropriate science to bolster her theism. Okay, so she says that she doesn't want to go down the causation route because there's effectively there will be too much conflict with scientists, and yet she doesn't want to go down the science route to answer the big questions, because she said that you can be she used the word scientistic. I think she meant scientific, or maybe she meant too skeptical. What I take that to mean is that science is not going to be an ally in terms of confirming or bolstering her religious position. So it's useless to her. So she says not to be too scientistic. I don't see how you can be too scientific, because all science is doing is assessing the evidence and seeing where it leads. And if it doesn't lead to religion, how could you say that's being too scientific? You can never, in my view, you can never be too scientific, and in a way, you can really never be too skeptical, because skepticism is just a method of critical thinking and honestly assessing the evidence to see whether a claim is true or not. So this thing about, I've heard this before, oh, you're too skeptical, oh, you're too scientific, oh, you're too materialistic. And it's typically from people who hold views which they can't provide any evidence to support. So I get dismissed as being closed-minded, I'm too skeptical, I don't believe in anything, etc., etc., etc. And I have to correct people and say, no, I've got plenty of beliefs. And we probably share 99% of our beliefs, and it's just the 1%. You've got some beliefs which I don't happen to hold, because I don't think you've got sufficient evidence to support these beliefs. And you believe these things on faith, and it's got nothing at all to do with science. So that wasn't the first, what I thought was a weird comment for a professional philosopher to make, that you're being too scientific. Let's have a look. What else did she say? Yeah. Okay, well, that's about it from her, because she didn't really... Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah. I apologize. I've written notes down here, but, it was a long discussion, and bits are popping in and out of my head. Okay, so I did remember something which I wanted to comment on what she said. Yeah. So, yeah, the question is then, if she doesn't want to go down the causation route, which route is she going down? And she gave a really bizarre kind of example. She said that there are ways of inquiring or asking questions. There are ways of answering questions without going down the causation route. And she gave an example of, for example, in mathematics, we don't go down the causation route when we try to explain why the number 7 is not divisible by 3. And I thought, great, good. Now we're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere in a Cartesian way, where Descartes wanted to prove his own existence in the same way that we can prove a point in mathematics, that 2 + 2 = 4. We can have the certainty that 2 + 2 = 4. And Descartes wanted to do the same with being, to prove that he's a being. And he wanted to do it with, I think, therefore I am. He thought he'd come up with the same kind of thing, which was an analog to mathematics. And I thought, good, she's going to do the same thing. So she said this, yes, we can go down normal causation route. Here's an example. And then she didn't go anywhere with it. I thought that she was going to present some kind of amazing equation, which is not causation, it's more abstract, and present us with a proof of God. But she didn't. She just left it. She let it hang. And she said that she went from that to something which, in my view, is completely, almost not an analog at all. It doesn't really follow from that, which is that she said that we can go, there's another non-causation way of explaining things, purpose. So we can go down the purpose. We can look at the way the world works. We can look at the way human beings, the biology of human beings, and what is our purpose. And from there, perhaps then we can answer these big questions. And then you know what she did? She said, okay, I think I'll leave it there for now. Oh dear. So, no, she didn't. She suggested that she was going to go down that route and argue from purpose, but she didn't present an argument. She just suggested this is the way to answer the big questions, not from causation, which is always going to lead to conflict between religion and science, but we're going to go down another route, purpose. Well, that is also going to come into conflict with science, because we've got the theory of evolution and we've got abiogenesis. We can, I think, justifiably assert that. Well, let's not say assert, but conclude with a fair degree of confidence that everything in existence came to be as it is now by purely natural means. That is a fair hypothesis, and is probably the one by Occam's razor that is most likely true. That's my view, but obviously the three theists who are there don't share that view any more than they share Richard Dawkins' view. So let's move on. I'm going to come back to her shortly, because she said something near the end that was absolutely unbelievable, coming from a professional philosopher. I just couldn't believe I was hearing my ears, but I'll come back to that. Now I must come to Richard Swinburne, of course. I don't know, Swinburne, he's getting old. A lot of people claim that he's senile. I don't think he's senile, because really I expect that he's rehashing in fairly basic terms the same old arguments that he's been clinging to for the last, I don't know, 70, 80 years, however old he is. Effectively, it can be distilled down to this. His insistence that the constants in the universe could not only not be as they are, but they could not be maintained. They could not continue to be as they are unless there was something effectively maintaining them. Now, you saw in the clip earlier that I played with Dawkins, this was really the crux of his argument, if you can call it an argument, that there had to be a first cause, and he doesn't. I mean, to his credit, he doesn't insist that it's infinity. He said it might be infinity, it might not be infinity. He doesn't know that. So it might have always been there, or some other explanation. But there must be something which gave rise to the constants, gave rise to space and matter, etc., the Big Bang. And the fact that matter behaves as it does consistently must mean that something is continually keeping it in this state. So yes, obviously, it is a causation. It is a causation argument. Dawkins did not like that at all. The idea that it must be so. I don't think that Swinburne really managed to establish that it must be so, that it couldn't just be so as a matter of nature. It couldn't just be so, that something must have caused it to be so, and something must be continuing to cause it to be so. There was, in my view, a rather petty argument between Dawkins and Swinburne about whether this first cause would necessarily be complicated or relatively simple. Now, Dawkins has said and insisted that we understand things in terms of more simple things. So we have complicated things. We have human beings, for example, and we understand human beings by looking back at the simple beginnings. And Dawkins has said that the universe and that the physics is relatively simple compared with the incredible complexity that we saw in the evolutionary process, biology, etc. It's relatively simple compared with that. And Swinburne kept coming back to this and saying, well, no, it's not, you see, because the universe has so many things in it. How can it be simple? Oh dear. I don't really want to get into that. Of course, the way I'm sure that the way that Dawkins meant it is that, it's not the number of things in the universe that counts. And Dawkins is talking about if we go back to the Big Bang, from there it was simple and it gradually became more complicated. I don't know. I think that Swinburne got a bit mixed up with that, and he somehow thought that he'd got a gotcha moment with Dawkins by insisting that the universe has always been, even from the Big Bang, highly complex, and that if he could somehow falsify Dawkins' assertion that the universe started simplistically, and that really the constants, as far as we know them, are relatively simple compared with other things. If he could somehow falsify that argument or statements by Dawkins, he could somehow get his God in. And I don't really think that's the case. I think that Swinburne made too much of this, but this question is a legitimate one, that if there's a Christian God, let's forget about first cause, because Swinburne obviously is arguing that there's a Christian God, not only that it's a Christian God, but that it's a person. And he went back to, he quoted out of Genesis, of all places. Well, not of all places, but he did quote out of Genesis to argue that the first cause must be a personal God, because of course in Genesis it tells you that God is made in our image, and God is obviously a person, and this person is obviously a self-existent thing which has always existed and which causes other things to exist and maintains them in existence by all the constants and the laws which it originated. So yeah, so obviously he is arguing for the Christian God. Now Dawkins jumped on this and said, well, look, if we're talking about your God, can this God read my mind? Can it read your mind? And he said, yes, of course it can. And he said, well, then it can read the minds of, I don't know, what's the population of the world? 8 billion people simultaneously. How could such a thing not be complicated? Swinburne then went to a really strange thing. Really strange. He said, well, you see, you don't understand at all, because we've got this in the universe. We've got particles, which we're told from science and the theory of gravity that particles affect everything in the universe. Now, a particle's a very simple thing, but it has a big effect. Well, maybe so, or maybe not, because I think that the effect of a particle on the entirety of the universe, I would think would be incredibly small and not really comparable with what's being claimed for an all-powerful God. So that particle's power is very limited. It's infinitesimally small, I would argue, on the entirety of the universe, compared with the powers that are being claimed for a God. Because obviously we're talking about a God that brought the whole of the universe into existence and is maintaining it. So if it's a simple thing, it's doing an incredibly big job, whereas one particle in the universe, a Higgs boson or whatever, is doing an incredibly small job in the universe. So that's the kind of flaw in Swinburne's thinking or presentation of his thoughts that makes me think he really shouldn't be on the stage at all discussing these things. Because if me, and I did A-level philosophy, and I'll tell you I didn't get grade A, okay, that was 25 years ago, I should have really studied harder. But I mean, if I can spot the flaws in his arguments, and he's supposed to be Professor Emeritus at Oxford University, all right, in theology, I don't know to what extent he has studied philosophy, but it doesn't matter, because as we saw with, what's her name again? Sylvia Jonas, they're still capable of making incredibly stupid mistakes. Incredibly stupid. So, yeah, just one final thought of my own on that, as to whether, if there is a Christian God, could it possibly be simple? The problem is simplicity or complexity. These are attributes or properties or descriptions of the constitution of something pertaining to the natural world. And we've only got examples in the natural world of things which are complex and simple. So it seems to me that applying that to something which is outside of nature, if such a thing exists, something which doesn't really have any spatial or any kind of properties of the type that we're used to in the natural world, is kind of not maybe a valid way of approaching any kind of concept of God. I don't know. I'm putting that out there. I'm not really sure whether it's entirely valid or whether it's really fruitful. But the main point is that Swinburne was trying to debunk, he was trying to falsify what Richard Dawkins was saying, that if you could get him on one thing, he could somehow get his God in there. And I really just don't think that's the way that it works. And I don't think that Swinburne made a single, I don't think Swinburne actually won any of his exchange. I don't think he made any good points against Richard Dawkins at all. And I suppose you could say I'm saying that because I'm an atheist and Swinburne isn't. Well, I don't know, just judge on the way that I've evaluated it. Because I know a lot of you guys are atheists out there. You sometimes disagree with the way that I've seen things. So it's not as tribal as you think. Why a person? Oh God, this video is getting too long. I'm really sorry. You might as well just go and watch it. Why a person? I've written down here. Well, okay, yeah. So, yeah, well, Swinburne's effectively saying that because we resulted from the creation, that it must necessarily be the case that whatever created us is in some way similar to us. He just asserts that. He doesn't back it up here. That's when he went to Genesis. Yeah. Oh, okay. Swinburne appealed to Occam's razor. I found this really strange, because we were looking at the possibility of actually he created a straw man, because nobody suggested that a God created his God. So he made this straw man, and he said, you can't have one God creating another God, because then it would be a greater God than our God, which is already omnipotent and perfect in every way, and then it wouldn't be, you see, and it would also violate Occam's razor, because you've just got this one entity, you don't need to add another. Yeah, but with Occam's razor you don't add any God at all. You've got your entity, it's called the universe. By Occam's razor you don't add any entity into that. You don't even add a little entity, let alone one that is all powerful and all supreme, etc. Okay, well, I mean, just to say that obviously now and again Dawkins was rebutting a lot of this in a way along the lines of the same way that I was. I was going to play you a clip of keep forgetting her name, Sylvia Jonas, because she did come in with something quite absolutely astonishing near the end. Yeah, so she said she was reflecting on everything in terms of, yeah, because there was this question. Excuse me a moment. Let me just collect my thoughts. I've been going for 25 minutes non-stop. Yeah, so the question was put out there: what is it going to look like if we're going to get any kind of evidence, or if we're going to get closer to solving this mystery? How is it going to look? And of course, Dawkins said that it's going to be relatively simple, and it's going to be like a theory of everything. Swinburne more or less said, well, we're never going to, because of the nature of it, we're not going to be able to, get to God and analyze God in that sense. So, but then he started saying, but it must exist. It's simply, we went down that route again. And I can't remember what the Hindu lady said, but believe me, it wasn't anything of any importance. But Sylvia, she started talking, and she turned to Richard Dawkins, and she said, do you realize that, 93% of the world's population are religious, and the vast bulk of those are theists? What are you going to say to those people who've got those beliefs? Are you going to tell them they're all deluded? And Richard Dawkins squared up to her. He looked at her very seriously, and he said, yes. He just said that one word. He didn't point out to her that she's appealing to popularity. And I couldn't believe my ears that she appealed to popularity like that. She's supposed to be a professor of philosophy at the University of Jerusalem, and appealing I mean, what was the purpose behind that question if she's not appealing to popularity? In other words, there must be something in religion. There must be a God, because so many people believe in God. There just simply must be. And you've rejected every other argument. Can't you accept this one because so many people believe it? It must be true. They can't all be. Are they all deluded? And Dawkins said, well, yes. I mean, based on what we know and the lack of evidence and everything, yes, they are deluded. In other words, they're wrong, or they're wrong in the sense that they haven't got sufficient evidence. They haven't got evidence to prove their supernatural beliefs. Oh yeah, and she turned to another one. I mean, as if she didn't do argument ad populum, she then went to argument by authority. She said that she knows of a lot of people, and a lot of people in the world are highly educated, yet they believe in God. What are you going to say to them? Okay, well, I'm not even going to comment on that. But Richard Dawkins didn't give that point the time of day either. Well, actually, what Dawkins said about that is that you'll find a lot of people who are educated to a high level. They're spiritual, but without necessarily being theists. And she said, well, I personally know in Jerusalem of a lot of highly educated people, and they are theists. And, well, again, what does that amount to? It amounts to argument from authority. Lots of clever people believe it, therefore it must be true. So we can dismiss that, and I'm just amazed. I don't know, didn't she do philosophy? Didn't she do a beginner's class on logical fallacies? It seems not. It seems not. One thing that Dawkins did ask her, and this was really interesting, really sharp question. Dawkins looked at her because obviously she's talking about Jewish scientists, and he said, do they believe that they will survive death? Now, most of us know that in Judaism, life after death is not really a big thing. It's not something which is sort of important in the doctrine in the same way that it is in Christianity. And she had to concede that, that's not something which is important. And really, I suppose that if it's not important, then what would be important? What difference would the Jewish God make if there's no life after death? So, oh yeah. Sorry, I keep coming back to her. You're going to end up having to watch this. Yeah. So, yeah, she said to Dawkins at the end that there are people who believe in you. She said, okay, but there are people who believe in life after death, and you can't dismiss their beliefs because they may well have these beliefs for good reasons. And I thought, great, what are these good reasons? And two that she brought up. One is the upbringing they've got, and the other one is the conviction that they've got that it's true. Absolutely unbelievable. Where did they get her from? The fact that she's got a video on YouTube, to be honest with you, although I shouldn't really say that because Dawkins has now got a YouTube channel, but I don't know. I honestly don't know. She was bringing up points that, I mean, even a lot of the dumbest Christians who phoned into the atheist experience in the line will be too embarrassed to bring up. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, sorry. One more thing. And somebody asked him, I can't remember who it was. Oh yeah, it was the host, asked Dawkins. Oh yes, Richard. I mean, it was almost like, yeah, you've proven your points that, yeah, these three lemons haven't got any good reason to believe in the existence of God, but come on. I mean, Christianity's done some good things in the world. What about art? What about music? What about architecture? That was bizarre. I mean, what has that got to do with the truth of a religion? And of course, Dawkins said, yeah, of course, as I would say. I mean, I listen to a lot of choral music. I mean, personally, I'm speaking personally. I listen to a lot of classical choral music, Bach, Mozart. It might seem weird, an atheist listening, but it shouldn't seem weird because people have done beautiful things. There have been artists of all different belief systems who have produced it. Just testament, not to the truth of what is contained in the religious works, that it points to anything real, but just that people can create beautiful works of art. It doesn't prove any of the supernatural claims. But yeah, he did ask this question. Of course, Dawkins said the same as me. Yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. I love Christian art. There's great Islamic art and, you know, Hindu art, etc. It's fantastic. But I mean, really, you can say, well, okay, if you're going to argue that Christianity is true because some of the great composers, we've got Michelangelo, etc., masterpieces, if you're going to say Christianity must be true because, you know, they must have been inspired by the Christian God, then, well, what about Islam? They've got amazing mosques in the Far East. You know, I've seen them. They're absolutely stunning. I mean, a lot of them look better than, you know, and more amazing than, you know, like Notre Dame and St. Peter's, etc. Well, I suppose Allah must be the true God then, right? Well, wait a minute. What about Hinduism? What about some of the masterpieces they've created? I suppose Hinduism, but no. So they all cancel each other out. Okay, but why are they bringing up these beginners' points? These, you know, these idiots, these fallacies? It's unbelievable. Kudos to Richard Dawkins for getting through that. He somehow survived. I thought he was going to have a heart attack on many, many occasions. He was having to clench his fists, and, you know, there was so much was said that I'm sure he would have wanted to jump in. He somehow got through it all. Okay, well, that's about it. I did actually enjoy that, and I've enjoyed talking about this long video. If any of you guys are with me still after 37 minutes, I thank you. I do thank you for hanging on to the bitter end. It might interest you to know that for every 100 people that start this kind of video, there's only about 25 of you left near the end. So if you guys are still with me, thanks. Thank you very much for supporting my channel and watching. And I look forward to your comments. And I'll be back again with another video very soon. Bye for now.